Welcome to No More Desire, where we build a mindset and lifestyle for lasting recovery from porn. My name's Jake Castleman, and I'm excited to dive in with you. Let's get started, my friend. What can be so confusing for us, especially when it comes to addiction, is we become attached to the pleasure of the addiction, but we also become attached to the pain of the addiction, the self-punishment of the addiction. And this is so counterintuitive with kind of our traditional understanding of go towards pleasure and avoid pain, but we can become attached to shame and guilt and feelings of self-loathing and depression. We can really become attached to the pain. It's our companion.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Unhooked. I'm your host, Jeremy Lipkowitz. Today, I'm sitting down with someone I really respect in the recovery space, and I'm happy to call him a friend, Jake Castleman. Jake is a coach and the founder of No More Desire, where he helps men not just quit porn, but actually lose the desire for it and build what he calls a true recovery lifestyle. In this conversation, we dig into the difference between simply staying sober from porn and actually living in recovery. Jake breaks down his 4 pillars of healing. We also get into perfectionism, the high achiever mindset, and why just trying to stay in control will never create the kind of life you actually want. If you are on this journey and you want more support, community, and coaching around this work, you can learn more about my program, Unhooked Academy, by heading over to unhookedacademy.com. Enrollment for the program is currently closed, but the next round opens soon and spots are limited, so jump on the waitlist today. All right, let's get into it. Here is my conversation with Jake Castleman. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Unhooked. I'm your host, Jeremy Lipkowitz. Today with a friend of mine, I'm happy to say friend of mine, Jake Castleman. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jeremy. It's awesome to be here, man. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. I want to jump straight in. There's a lot of questions I have for you about your method, your background. But one thing, you emphasize a lot that recovery is about losing the desire for porn and developing what you call a recovery mindset and a recovery lifestyle, not just white knuckling it and trying to abstain from the behavior. How do you explain that difference to men who are just starting out?
So I think when I first started recovering from pornography, I was under this impression, which a lot of us can be under, which is, okay, if I can just get this porn problem under control, then all my problems will go away. It will lead to all the other suffering in my life being fixed. And I think that's true, that the addiction going away will help a lot in multiple areas, but it's more so that I need to work on the other problems in my life to improve those areas. And by bolstering myself and overcoming a lot of the protective kind of mechanisms that I have, or the things in my life that aren't bringing me joy, they're bringing me misery, a lot of the patterns that aren't serving me well, the isolation that I'm feeling in my life and relationships, the things from my nutrition to my exercise to what am I spending my time doing each day? All of these things are making me unhappy, and that unhappiness, this lack of fulfillment, this disconnection from myself, from others, that is all feeding my need that I feel for the addiction. And that really is how I state it to clients, is a part of you believes you need this. Mm-hmm. It truly feels that you need this. And if we can reduce the reasons for that need, eventually it can go away. You can no longer desire pornography, and instead you can desire real relationships, desire fulfillment, meaning, purpose, desire to do things that actually cause you long-lasting satisfaction.
Mm-hmm. What would you say, because I imagine there are guys out there listening who are saying, what do you mean? Like, what are you talking about that I won't desire porn? Like, maybe I won't watch it, but to think that I won't desire it, like, that it can just be such a foreign concept. So how do you explain how that's even possible, or what that really means on a kind of a physiological level, a felt sense level? What does it mean to no longer desire porn?
Yeah, I agree with you. So there are four pillars in my program that I focus on. One is emotional, the other is neurological, biological, and relational. And I separate neurological and biological for specific reasons, and I'll get into that. But the emotional side is the side that's the most complex for so many of us. What we often don't understand is that my addiction to porn is not really a sexual problem, it's an emotional problem. It's an attachment that I have. In fact, I love what can be so confusing for us, especially when it comes to addiction, is we don't we become attached to the pleasure of the addiction, but we also become attached to the pain of the addiction, the self-punishment of the addiction. And this is so counterintuitive with kind of our traditional understanding of, go towards pleasure and avoid pain, but we can become attached to shame and guilt and feelings of self-loathing and depression. We can really become attached to the pain. It's our companion, right? There's actually a relationship with dopamine that occurs there in the pain. So most of us don't understand that, right? Which it's completely illogical. It doesn't function according to logic. It functions according to emotion, to the unconscious mind. And so if I can begin regulating emotion, and as you teach so well, Jeremy, self-awareness, right? Mindfulness, if I can start to get in touch with what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, understanding my emotions, and actually regulating really, really well by having inner dialogue, by understanding things like anger and being able to work through them effectively, by understanding what a craving serves in my life or what a part of my mind is trying to achieve through the addiction, and to begin to gain self-compassion and an acceptance for, okay, I actually understand why this is happening and I can address it and work through the layers and get to the underlying reasons of fears I'm going through, shame that I'm feeling, inadequacy in my life, or loss that I'm going through, sadness, right? Things that are often kind of stuffed in our unconscious until we take a little time to be still to get present with what we're going through. So the emotional regulation piece is fundamental. So if I start working on that, right, then I start to get past some of this attachment that I have to the pain of addiction and the pleasure of addiction, because I'm solving that pain and I'm experiencing pleasure in other areas of my life. I don't need to escape through the addiction because my emotions are actually regulated. And then neurological, right? My nervous system, because of our technological age, and your podcast is called Unhooked, right? So unhooking from technology. I've been doing a series of a few different episodes on my own podcast about smartphones and how we're so attached to constant distraction and constant stimulation. And smartphones have especially brought that home for all of us, myself included. And so getting away from those things, from what I would call base pleasures, they are high intensity kind of pleasures. They're instant gratification, right? They're very quick and they're very fast, but very low effort. Very, very low effort. And when you understand Dr. Anna Lemke's book, Dopamine Nation, she's a brilliant doctor. She talks about how pain and pleasure are processed in the same part of the brain. And there's actually a scale between pain and pleasure. When I am pressing on pleasure all the time and just overloaded with this easy instant gratification, then what happens is I get backloaded with all this pain, right? Because there has to be a relatively equal level of pain and pleasure in my life, which again sounds so strange to so many of us. It's like, well, no, all I want I want pleasure and to avoid pain. That's not really the way your dopaminergic system works. So if I'm pursuing social media, video games, TV, porn, junk food, all this stuff so frequently, then I'm pressing on that pleasure lever all the time, and the other side has got to come back down. So I experience chronic anxiety and chronic depression, and I can't focus. So ADHD types of symptoms. And there's multiple factors to these, right? It's not all one thing, but this plays a major role. And so if I can get away from those and instead go to what many of us did much more naturally for most of the history of humanity, which is noble pleasures, things that require a relatively equal amount of effort and render a relatively equal amount of reward, right? It's a more mild reward. It's not so intense, it's pretty moderate. Like, for instance, if I build a business, right, and you know what this is like, I have to work very, very hard on that business. I have to go through a lot of pain and a lot of stress to then get a reward. And it may be really meaningful. It's like you get that first client, or, you reach that dollar mark and it's like, boom, oh, it feels great. But it required pain, or in other words, effort to get there. And so there's a natural balance of pain to pleasure there. Same thing with reading, which requires effort. Writing, this requires effort. We get a sense of pleasure, but it's not like these instantly and easily accessible pleasures we get with so little effort with technology and other things of that nature. And then biological, if you're nutrition, exercise, sleep, right? So that's that third pillar. These things are extremely meaningful. Mind and body are one. You're of, the Buddhist kind of background. So I think that is much more inherent in Eastern types of philosophies. Whereas modern Western, we've disconnected the mind and the body since the 1600s. And Descartes, he said the mind and body were separate. Body's a machine. But now we understand they really are one. And there's books like The Body Keeps the Score that is driving home that truth, and other books where we scientifically understand mind and body are connected. So take care of your nutrition, take care of your exercise, take care of your sleep. You are going to be in such a much more peaceful biological state. Then your mind won't so frequently be saying, I need something, I need something, I need to feel better, right? Because you're already feeling good. So you don't have as much need for that. And then the fourth pillar is relational. If I have good relationships, good connections, I'm not going to be seeking a fabrication of that connection through pornography. It's a cheap version of connection. And truly, that's one of the fundamental reasons we go to it is we want to feel connected. We want to feel safe. We want people to accept us and love us, but it's very symbolic how we do that through pornography.
Yeah. So many interesting things you touched on. One of the things that I had never heard of, you mentioned this term noble pleasures. And I kind of like this idea. One of the ways that I like to frame it is that you've got to earn your dopamine. You've got to actually, like, when I go to the gym, I know it's giving me dopamine and I love it, but it's an earned dopamine. It's like a healthy form. And that it's not, pleasure is not the enemy, dopamine is not the enemy, but it has to be in a healthy balance. Otherwise, it kind of gets out of whack. Tell me a little bit more about noble pleasures. What does that look like?
Yeah. So with working out, for instance, right? If I go work out, there is very little, well, I shouldn't say very little. When you first start working out, for the first several weeks especially, there's a lot of pain, a lot of strain. If you haven't worked out for years, your muscles hurt, your body aches, your joints are in pain, right? You're like, I hate this. I hate every moment of this. This is not fun, right? But then because you're putting in effort and you're going through those initial stages, you reach a point eventually with a noble pleasure like exercise where you gain momentum, you get used to it, you gain the skills, right? And then it starts to feel good. Like when you go to the gym and you lift, it's like, oh, it hurts, but it's like, oh, it feels good, right? And so then you feel a lot more of that pleasure in balance with the pain, right? So you earn that, right? Same thing with something like writing a book, right? And it doesn't all have to be this big. There are simpler things like, meditation or sitting in silence or going on a walk. And
washing the dishes. I mean, like very simple things.
Washing the dishes. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And there are ways of actually, as you know, maximizing kind of just the simple pleasure you can gain from that and being very present with what you're doing. But that, again, requires effort for you to be focused and in the present moment. It's not passive. That's pretty active. Correct me if I'm wrong, being mindful in that moment. And so with writing a book, though, the initial strain of launching into that, you have to go through ideation. You have to start to structure the book. You have to look at, okay, what's the outline? What are the chapters? What are my ideas? How am I combining all this and bringing it together? There's a lot of strain. And then you start to gain momentum and you have these kind of pockets where you'll get in the zone, right? And you're writing and it just feels so great because it's all just flowing and it's coming to you. And then other times you sit down, you're like, I know nothing. Like, I don't know anything about writing apparently. Right. And you're kind of blocked and it takes more effort. Right. And you have that variability. So that requires our effort. It requires pain. And so because I'm going through that very natural process of the pain and the effort, I'm rewarded with the dopamine on the back end, right? Whereas if I front load with pleasure with no effort, I'm going to get pain on the back end. And when it comes to those base pleasures, when I'm doing that constantly, right, every day, so if I'm spending 2 hours a day on social media, watching reels and all that, I'm getting dopamine spike after dopamine spike with each one of those reels. Then I develop chronic mental disorders, right? Where I am anxious all the time. I am depressed frequently, right? I can't focus because your brain is depleted of dopamine. You're damaging your receptors. Why does the brain work that way? To be honest, I don't know that we actually know. Maybe there is some information out there like that, but I think it's interesting that it does work that way in the balance between pain and pleasure.
Hmm. Yeah, this topic of pain or discomfort is something that was just coming up in the community call I had last night. So much of this recovery process seems to go back to making friends with discomfort or being okay with things that are uncomfortable. And it seems like that's an inherent part of the recovery process, is not just wanting things to be pleasurable all the time.
Yeah. It's really true. And one of the things that I say is we have to learn how to tolerate painful emotions and sensations, right? And to regulate them too, right? There's ways to be able to work through it, but to a certain degree, like you're saying, we have spent a lifetime, many of us, and most of the men I work with, as I'm sure is the case for you, it's decades of time not feeling painful emotion. Don't feel fear, don't feel anger. I mean, we're turned off to the fact that we feel maybe angry frequently, but we're not really aware of it. And so we're trying to offset the anger. We're trying to not feel the fear, don't feel the shame, don't feel sadness. And the addiction acts as this buffer. And so what so many men go through is when they start to come out of that, they start to feel a lot more. And it feels very overwhelming for weeks, months. And then you begin to start to be able to tolerate and move through the emotion. You have to learn how. And you actually have to learn how to be a functioning human being that takes in all emotion, painful and joyful emotion. And for us, and myself included, that's the way I was. I didn't know how to do that. Right? I spent a lifetime not doing that.
Mm. I'd love to dive into your background in part because, I actually resonate with, I was listening to some podcast you were on where you were talking about your childhood and how some of the early addictions for you were around video games and food. And I remember
Yes.
those were my first, food was the first one. I remember when I must have been, I don't know, 7, 8 years old. I would sneak into the kitchen to like eat the strawberry granola bar, secretly. I would hide it because I wasn't allowed to have
Right.
it. And food was an early addiction for me. And then video games, I was, hooked on video games. I would stay up till 4 in the morning playing. And it's something that a lot of guys I see still struggle with. And I, not secretly, transparently, still every once in a while, every few years, I'll kind of download a video game and it might get out of control and then I have to delete everything and say, okay, I'm done with video games. So I'm curious first of all, just out of curiosity, what was the video game that you played when you were a kid? Do you remember some of them?
I know instantly
Uh-huh.
because when I think of it, I feel the nostalgia and I feel the instant draw. Like it's like I played yesterday. It's Legend of Zelda. All
Okay.
the Ocarina of Time was my big one on the N64
Mhm.
and Majora's Mask, right? I was very much kind of the platformer adventurer gameplay, like just like me by myself playing my one player game.
Yeah.
That's what I
Yeah.
was all about, right?
Yeah.
And that was from the time I was 4 years old I really went to video games as my place of peace, of safety, of a feeling of security. And honestly, as I've reflected on a feeling of control. And this is really common with pornography addiction too. We seek control to hold all the cards, right? There's no risk involved in pornography. I can determine what I see, how I see it, who I'm involved with, all that. No one's requiring anything of me. Yeah, often, a lot of us, we lacked power and control when we were young. I was the youngest in my family until my younger brother was born, who's 5 years younger than me. And so for most of my childhood, I kind of was the youngest, right? And all my siblings were 2 years apart. They were all older than me. And I just didn't feel, because I was someone who was very anxious and very shy, I didn't feel like I had much of a voice. And so I think I craved that power and that control. And when I got to sit down with a video game, I could advance through levels. I could earn, stars and gems and all those things. I could beat the bad guys and the boss, and I could really feel important and significant, right? So the control, the feelings of importance and significance, that was my place to experience all that. And unfortunately, when you go to that so frequently, then actually doing that in real life becomes far less attractive and very much unknown,
Hmm.
right? So I'd things like I could have gone out for track when I was 12 years old. I actually had a PE teacher who said, you need to try out for track. You have a body like a machine. You'd be perfect for this. That felt so out of my element and so terrifying. I didn't try it. Whereas if I wasn't hooked on video games and and food and just all and TV, all these easy outlets, I would have craved that. I would have found other ways of gaining that meaning,
Hmm.
but we can fabricate that meaning through technology. So I grew up with that, and I very much see that I was set up through the TV and the video games and the junk food and all that. When I was 12 years old, I gravitated, well, okay, so I went through puberty, right? And I started masturbating because that's what virtually every boy does when they go through puberty, whether they know what it is or not. For most boys, it just naturally starts to happen. I didn't know what it was. I had no sexual education whatsoever. I was very isolated in that way. Unfortunately, my parents didn't teach me. They know that was a mistake now, but they had all their reasons for that. My dad was actually struggling with pornography addiction himself, so it was hard for him to even address any of that. And that's public information. Because he does the same thing for a profession. So for me, I didn't know what was happening, but when I went through that, it was all about, there was a lot of shame and isolation surrounding that, a lot of fear. And so I gravitated to what felt shameful and isolating and fearful for me, which was to go and hide and, look at these pictures and all that stuff and start to develop this addiction. Because that's how I related to myself. It's what I was attached to emotionally. And it's how I related to sexuality, that it was something to be hidden. It was something shameful. It was something unknown. And so I'm not going to tell anybody about this, and I'm just going to do it myself, right? And so for me, kind of that history evolved to when I was 18, I discovered that I had social anxiety. I'd had it my whole life. I really didn't know that, and that started to put some pieces together for me because I realized I am under so much emotional pressure all the time to perform and to be seen a certain way. How does that play into my addiction, right? How does that play into me running away to pornography? And I was one of the lucky ones to know that because I had a dad that had studied the brain science and written a book on the brain science of pornography addiction. So I understood fundamentally it wasn't just, I knew what it was, at least in general, right? So I began to explore, how do I improve my emotional state? How do I improve my mental well-being? How can I work with my mind? I discovered I had a lot of perfectionism, and that's perfectionism and social anxiety are like really one and the same, right? Perfectionism drives the need to be perfect and to be seen a certain way, and the anxiety of, are people going to accept me? Are they going to approve of me? Are they going to love me? So I need to look this certain way and perform for them, right? So as I began to work on that, I went through a lot of stages, and all the things that I teach and those 4 pillars I mentioned, those are all things I've lived to change and alter those things, and things I'm still working on, right? Now, blessedly in sobriety and at a higher level than I used to be at, but we're always progressing. And so, about 7 years into sobriety, I had been functioning on the essentially being very disciplined about my daily routines, spirit, mind, and body, about triggers and boundaries, keeping my boundaries up, having my rules, getting out and getting social with people. I was all about the positive mindset and using gratitude and constantly focusing on what positive emotions, positive emotions. It was kind of an exhausting way of staying sober, but it was what I knew. And 7 years in, when I really hit this rock bottom where I discovered I still had an addictive mindset, I knew that something needed to change. And that's when I started to feel inspired. I need a new way of perceiving the world and perceiving myself. And that's where elements of acceptance and compassion and self-awareness began to emerge for me, because I could no longer keep up the constant grind of be positive, replace addictive thoughts, ignore, get away from them, don't face them.
Yeah.
It was exhausting.
And that's
Yeah.
something I wanted to ask you about, getting back to this topic of, the recovery mindset and the recovery lifestyle that you talk about a lot. When you work with someone, what are some of the signs that someone is still in that just trying not to relapse mindset as opposed to living a recovery lifestyle? Like, what do you look for that might tell you this person is still in that, okay, I just got to not relapse mindset?
I think that when people say things like, I'm staying in control, or I'm resisting, or, I'm just keeping myself busy, those words are really clear indications that a lot of people use that shows me you're not quite there. Like you're working on it and you're trying, but you're still approaching it in a way that is not going to function well long term. You might stay sober, but you're not going to be very happy while you're sober. It's going to be really tiring.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
it. There's such a big difference. If there's one thing people can really take away, there's such a big difference between sobriety and recovery. Like, you can be sober, you can not act out, but you might still be miserable if you're not actually practicing what you call a recovery lifestyle, a recovery mindset.
Yeah. And for me, at the very center of my model, I mentioned the 4 pillars, but I'm also, I have the spiritual base that underlies all that. And I know you're in the secular realm, but it's really at the core of that spiritual base is self-awareness. Self-awareness, because if I do not approach my life from a place of self-awareness, you're done. It's whatever you're doing is not going to work. That has to be at the core of what you're doing. And again, fundamentally, that's about emotion, so much, because emotion is the greatest challenge that we face as human beings. I think, I mean, I'd love if you can disagree with that, but I don't think that there's anything that we face that's more difficult than emotion.
I would have a hard time disagreeing with that. I mean, I think in my own experience, some of the most difficult things, when I think about the most difficult things I've experienced, it's strong emotions like loneliness or isolation or rejection. They're all the emotions. Those are the most difficult. Like the physical external things, pain, physical pain, those are painful, but the suffering, the depths of suffering from some of these emotions does strike me as some of the worst. If someone is in that, what we might call just abstinence mindset or whatever you want to call it, but if they're not necessarily, if they're just resisting and, okay, I've got to maintain control, how do you gently nudge them in the right direction? How do you get them to actually shift their attitude or their perspective towards recovery?
I actually had an experience with a client a couple weeks ago that was very, very much in this vein, where he's lived his life being in the high achiever mindset, right? If I can just achieve enough, be the best, prove myself, accomplish enough, then I'll finally feel like I'm enough and that I have the self-worth that I crave. And then I won't need pornography because he's aware enough to realize that pornography functions as this avenue to try to feel significant and to feel lovable, right? And obviously it comes with the pleasure and the escape and all that stuff that we all deal with in the addiction. But that's a need it's trying to fulfill. And I have been working with him on, you have to learn to just embrace and move toward. That's actually, and that move toward painful emotion. And that phrase comes from Jenna Ramirsma, who's an IFS therapist. Brilliant. Move toward the painful emotion. And that for him has been so counterintuitive. He's like, what do you even mean? Why would I do that? That you want me to focus on the negative things in my life and like give space to these bad thoughts, right? And notice the languaging, right? Bad thoughts, negative feelings. This is how we term painful emotions. And I'm very deliberate about that. I don't say positive and negative emotions. I've trained myself to say painful and joyful emotions. And I make that very clear because they're both equally valuable. They're equally important because painful emotions can teach you some amazing things, but only if I'm willing to be present with them and move toward them. So it sounds too simple to work, but when people begin to just practice it and give it time, because the first time you try it, you might be like, this is miserable and horrible. I don't ever want to do this again, right? But to sit down and, okay, I feel anger right now. I'm going to actually turn my full, complete attention toward that angry part of me, and I'm going to say, come on in. I'm welcoming you in. Can you sit down with me? I'd love to just feel. And feel with the angry part of you. What does it say, right? I'm pissed off at this and that person because they're treating me poorly, and I'm tired of not being valued, and, I can't stand the way I'm treated at work, and, I want to be out of here and I want to quit. I don't want to do this anymore, right? Or things in my relationship, whatever it might be. Voice those messages. What does that part of you say? Not to vent, because I think this is where we easily get it wrong, and there's a very clear distinction, but it's very nuanced. It is not to vent the emotion. It is to witness the emotion. Witness it and welcome it in. Self-empathize. Just this strange concept, I think, to a lot of us, because we don't think of the mind in parts. When we start to think of it in like little subparts, little individuals that I'm actually kind of having an inner dialogue with and seeking to understand, that has helped me so much to be able to interact with my mind in a way that's compassionate and effective. So witness it. This is a part of me. It's not who I am. It's emotion, right? It's there. It has a message. It feels it's very important. Come on in. I'm welcoming you in, and I'm going to empathize with you. I'm going to feel what you feel, and I'm going to listen to your messages, right? So knowing it's not true, it's not reality, but it is an emotional force, and I need to give it room to feel it and be with it. And when I can just do that, and there's deeper levels we can go into, right? Which is what I do with the rail method. I start with anger, and then I get to deeper levels of fear and shame and grief and all that. But if I can just do that with something like anger or with a craving, and just welcome the part and say, what are you saying right now? What's your message right now? What are you feeling right now? And breathe into it, be with it. It's interesting how sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes that very intense emotion will actually fade, right? Within a couple of minutes, and then it's gone just because I've given it space. Or at least it will decrease in intensity simply by me bringing my full focus and attention to it. It's paradoxical. It's the exact opposite of what my mind says I should do. I need to do the opposite of what it says I should do.
I remember reading this story or this parable from a Buddhist teacher. I think it was Pema Chodron, but talking about these strong emotions and how to work with them. And she gave the metaphor that these strong emotions are like bulls, these bulls that are tied up. And if you put a bull in a tiny cage it's going to resist. It's going to be banging left and right, and smashing against the cage trying to get out. But if you give that bull a wide open pasture, it might kick around for a couple seconds, but if it has this wide open pasture, it's going to mellow out because it has so much space. It doesn't feel that confinement. And I think emotions can be it's quite similar. Once you give them space and allow them to be there, they mellow out. But it's the resistance that creates so much agitation in the mind.
And something I've been practicing as well, Jeremy, that's been interesting for me is to actually do this with physical pain as well. And I'm blessed enough to be someone who doesn't deal with chronic physical pain, so I can't speak to that. But for the rest of us who it's not chronic, but it's just when I'm at the gym, right, practicing actually bringing my full, complete attention to the muscle and to the pain I'm feeling there. Because we think, oh, I'll distract myself. I don't think about it. I don't want to, right? But actually practicing bringing my full attention to it and fully feeling it and actually expressing, like speaking to my body like it's another person and being like, hey, man, you're doing great. I'm here for you. Like, keep it up. I feel this pain with you. Like, I'm in this pain with you right now. You're doing a good job. This is, it sounds kind of funny in ways, but it's been really helpful for me.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you mentioned chronic pain. Are you familiar with Jon Kabat-Zinn and mindfulness-based stress reduction? So
No.
one of the reasons that mindfulness is so huge in Western society right now is because of this guy, Jon Kabat-Zinn, who helped usher it into the medical system back in the 1970s. And just to make a long story short, essentially he was working in medical systems, and they were trying to help people with chronic pain. And they realized that all these medications and medicines just weren't working for people with chronic pain. And so this guy, Jon Kabat-Zinn, who had been practicing mindfulness, introduced mindfulness as a possible solution and said, what if we give them tools of mindfulness and self-compassion? And they realized that this mindfulness-based approach was actually more effective than any treatment that they had to that time. And so then they developed this program called mindfulness-based stress reduction, and that's what really helped bring mindfulness into kind of the secular Western culture. The origins of mindfulness in the West really come from treating chronic pain because it was more effective than anything else. And the core of that practice was making space for the pain, like learning how to accept it, breathe with it, not try to push it away. And that's the core foundation of mindfulness in general.
I had no idea. That is very, very cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah,
let's talk about shame, because this is a big topic in this recovery process. How did shame show up in your own journey when you were dealing with your addiction?
So one of the memories that comes to me when you say that, Jeremy, is I think I was 19 and I'm working out at the gym. I'm listening to an audiobook. I was listening to Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. If people don't know Brene Brown, they should check her out. She's amazing. She's kind of a big deal. So listening to that book, I remember distinctly her saying, everyone deals with shame. Everybody. And just right then I was like, everybody? But I know that there's people who are really confident and really happy, and I bet they don't deal with shame, right? That's what I thought. She says, everybody deals with shame. And she said, in fact, if you are someone who thinks that you don't deal with shame, you're probably somebody who deals with the most shame of anybody. She doesn't state it that way. It's less direct, but she kind of states it in like a third person or second person kind of thing. And I remember thinking, well, that's not me, right? Because I was thinking, well, I don't really deal with that much shame. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she was the first person that I learned through her books and her YouTube content about shame and vulnerability. It's the most listened to TED Talk on psychology in existence, I believe. I believe it holds the record. It's over 20 million views or something at this point. It could be more. shame and vulnerability, that changed my life. I thought, I did not know about this. I did not know that other people felt these things. Um, and it seems kind of backwards what I'm saying because I thought I didn't deal with it, but I did deal with it. It's a little
It's a
confusing,
confusing,
right?
I
But
mean, I get
that's
it. It's a
yeah,
confusing, like you kind of feel it, but you also are in denial. So yeah, it makes sense.
yes. And so I learned about perfectionism, and perfectionism fundamentally, she explained, is it's just shame on steroids, right? I am not good enough. Therefore, and when we understand it through an IFS perspective, I must do everything perfect. If I do everything perfect, and perfect is a subjective term, but to this excellent extent, I got to do everything to this excellent extent, then I will never feel shame, right? Then I will never feel like I'm not good enough because I'm meeting all these bars. And the more that I've come to embrace those parts of me that have tried to act perfectly and to keep me from feeling shame, to understand and appreciate what those parts have tried to do, and to say, I see you, I see how hard you're working. I know that you're trying to help me earn my self-worth. I know that you're trying to help me feel good enough. And I love you, right? Like I love you are trying to help. Let me see what it is that you're protecting, right? Getting underneath to the shame. I deal with shame every day, every day. The difference is how I relate to it, that I know it's there and I'm able to be with it and to feel it and show, again, empathy for that part of myself and be in it and understand, okay, what is this? What am I feeling? And that it's a deeper reflection for all of us of our deeper core good desires. I really want to be a good person. I want to make a difference. I want to help people. And when I don't feel like I meet that bar, like I'm someone who feels the emotion intensely, right? And you can get into things, this makes me sound a little funny, but you can get into things with HSPs, highly sensitive people. It's about 25% of the population, people that feel both painful and emotion and joyful emotion very intensely, right? Just compared to kind of the other 75%. I'd love to be that 75%. That sounds really fun. I think that there's pros and cons though. Like I'm grateful to be who I am. But some of us just there's more waves. We go through the higher highs and lower lows. We feel things intensely. And some people they feel emotion too, but it's a little more even keeled. Um, that said, it gives me the ability, because I feel things intensely, to be able to get a little more detailed with emotion, to understand things a little deeper. Um, Not saying that one or the other is better, because we need both types. I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, though. I think there was an original question that I've totally ignored.
No worries. The ramblings are always useful. Um, to kind of focus this to a point, we're talking about shame, and as you're saying, being vulnerable is really powerful, and like letting go of that shame. But I know that a lot of what guys struggle with, everyone struggles with, but particularly guys with porn addiction, is being honest with someone that they care about. For example, if you have a partner and you're struggling with porn addiction, opening up to your partner, or opening up to a men's group, or opening up to a friend and
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, I'm struggling with this," can feel really scary when you've lived your life trying to control things and be perfect and make it look like you have it all together. And so this question of how to be honest with others, I mean, with yourself, first and foremost, but with others when it feels scary. Do you have any advice for someone who knows that they need to be honest with people in their lives, but they are afraid of that vulnerability?
Yeah. So one of the main things that comes to me is Drew Boa, one of my colleagues and also one of my friends, awesome guy. He explained vulnerability is different than transparency.
Mm.
I'd never heard anybody put it this way before. Being transparent is not being vulnerable. And so for people who don't know vulnerability, in order to connect, to feel a deep emotional connection with someone, I have to be vulnerable to them. And the root word, if we go to the Latin root, vulnerus, I believe I'm saying that correctly, is wound, right? So in order to be close to someone, I must be woundable. There is this, and Brene Brown explains it the same way. There's kind of this jumping off, like I'm teetering over this cliff. I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna jump, and like I hope there's like a floor below me. When I open up to someone and I say, here's something that I struggle with. It's hard for me. Um, I'm opening myself to the possibility that that person could take that and judge me. They could take that and kind of be nonchalant, like, oh, no big deal. That's not a big deal. Or they could take it and try to fix it, right? Well, why don't you just do this with it, right? Why don't you just think more this way? All these kinds of protective things that we use, that we can use in relationships to keep from feeling someone's pain with them, right? And I think there's a delicate balance with this too, because to be vulnerable, I also need to be cognizant and wise about who I share my vulnerable emotions with. Don't share it with somebody that you can't trust that vulnerable emotion with. Share it with someone who's earned the right to be in that vulnerable space with you, right? And share it with somebody who you've kind of reached that point with. And it's layer by layer, right? You're always reaching deeper levels of vulnerability. And some of us are more open than others. It depends on kind of your comfort level too, right? Is there something you're willing to say that you don't mind whether someone accepts or not? You're just being open. There's that point too. But learning to kind of open ourselves up to being wounded, knowing it does feel uncomfortable, knowing there is risk involved, being picky about who I kind of share things with, right? And knowing that without that, if I'm not willing to share my suffering, my weaknesses, my pain, I can't get close with somebody. And if I'm not willing to take in what they say and just be present with them to hear about their suffering or their pain, then there's no close relationship to be built. I can only get so close with someone by sharing all the happy stuff. I have to share the pain too, because it's universal. We all experience pain. We all know what it's like. I have to be willing to go there. Yeah.
Yeah. So find a safe space, find people who have earned that right. That's maybe the first step, like a stepping stone.
Yeah. I think it's good to find those communities. For me, my community where I really connect is with guys in addiction recovery. Like that is where I've gained so many of my friends is, I have a 12 step group that I go to. Like I've gone there for a few years. I teach a lot of things that go outside the 12 step realm, but I still recognize the value in it and the power in so many of the principles. And so I love to go there and spend time with the people and, do our shares and all that. It's meaningful. And I have friends I've had for years from that. And then I have another community that I connect with as well in the addiction recovery space. That's where I can find that brotherhood, right? Or the one I go to has girls and guys. So, brotherhood, siblinghood, if you will. But yeah, finding those spaces. And I think that, I go to church as well, right? That can be a good place to connect. Just finding an organized space, whether that be church or a community group or, a club, an addiction group, whatever it is, it can be hard to connect and actually find those opportunities without something that's, scheduled, regular, a community to be a part of. I think that helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Finding a place where you can put down the armor. Like for me, whenever I think of the word vulnerability, I always get this image of taking the armor off. And like you say, it's being woundable. It's like, okay, where can I take off the armor, take off the facade of needing to seem like I've got it all together, like I'm perfect, and actually let people know what's going on the inside, the parts of me that I'm ashamed of or afraid to speak out. And so yeah, if you can find a place like that. I mean, these recovery groups, that's one of the most beneficial parts of them, is that they're a safe space to talk about what you might be ashamed of.
And there's a difference between two, like smash and grab or floodlighting. Those are some terms I don't know if you've heard where I'm overly vulnerable. I'm smash and grab is like I reveal something that's
Mm,
so big with people that I shouldn't even be sharing that with, and it's like I'm trying to get attention for it. Being aware if I think I'm going to be vulnerable just to get attention, then just to call awareness to that and say, okay, part of me wants attention, but what's kind of my intention with sharing this? Is it to connect?
mm.
Is it to share something because I want to, kind of reach out, connect with someone, help them feel more comfortable sharing more of them with me? Or is it because I'm kind of looking for this validation, right? And I'm just like desperate for someone to see my pain and see how significant it is. So being careful about that, kind of walking that straight and narrow path or that middle way, right, between the two extremes of not being vulnerable at all versus being too vulnerable.
Yeah, I
Right?
mean, the intention behind it is really everything. Yeah.
Right intention, is that one of the eight on the
Yeah,
eightfold path?
yeah,
Yeah,
look at you,
yeah,
little Buddhist scholar over there.
yeah. Well, notice that I wasn't even certain of myself when I said right intention. I was like, I think that's on there.
Yeah,
But yeah.
fantastic. Well, last question for you. And speaking of, like finding safe people to talk to, if people are interested in learning more about your work or getting connected with you, where should they go to find out about that?
Yeah, so go to nomordesire.com. I have a free workshop on there, a free ebook as well. You can find them on my homepage, links to those. Um, in addition, I would, for those who want to get a little more invested, I would highly recommend the Rail Method. If you go to courses on my website, that is a short course that teaches you how to work through cravings, how to work through painful emotions in a systematic way it's deep, it's broad, it's done wonders for my clients. And it's yeah, I can't say enough about the value there. If you want to go in even deeper, I do one-on-one coaching, so that you'll find all that on my website.
Fantastic. Well, it's been great to have you on the show. And yeah, just love the work that you're doing. Amazing. Like, I really feel a kindred connection with your approach to recovery. And I think you're doing great work out there. So thanks for the work that you do.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeremy. You as well, man. It's wonderful to connect, and I feel the same. So
All right, folks, that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Unhooked. Catch you guys on the next episode.